66 million years ago, a rock roughly 6 miles wide slammed into what is now the coast of Mexico, and within a single day, the entire trajectory of life on Earth changed forever. But imagine, just for a moment, that the asteroid missed. Imagine it passed by Earth with only a few hours to spare, or broke apart harmlessly in the atmosphere, or simply arrived a few minutes later, missing the planet by a distance that would seem laughably small on a cosmic scale. If that single moment had gone differently, dinosaurs would never have gone extinct, and everything you know about the modern world, including your own existence, would likely never have happened. Start with the animals themselves, because dinosaurs at the moment of that asteroid impact were not primitive, sluggish creatures waiting to be replaced. They were incredibly advanced, wildly successful, and still evolving in fascinating directions. You would be looking at feathered raptors capable of complex social behavior, massive long-necked herbivores that had engineered their own ecological niches, and small, agile species that were beginning to develop traits eerily similar to modern birds. If you rewound the clock and let evolution continue along this path uninterrupted, you would likely see dinosaurs continuing to diversify, adapt, and refine themselves for millions of additional years, potentially developing even greater intelligence, more complex social structures, and more specialized bodies suited to nearly every environment on the planet. One of the most fascinating questions you could ask is whether a dinosaur species might have eventually developed human-level intelligence. Some scientists have pointed to a small group of dinosaurs called troodontids as the most likely candidates for this kind of evolutionary path. These creatures already had relatively large brains for their body size, forward-facing eyes that suggested depth perception, and grasping hands capable of fine motor control. If you gave a lineage like this another 66 million years of uninterrupted evolution, it is entirely plausible that a dinosaur descendant could have developed problem-solving abilities, tool use, and complex communication, potentially rivaling or even surpassing the intelligence that eventually emerged in early primates on the actual timeline of Earth's history. Here is where things get especially interesting for you personally, because if dinosaurs never went extinct, mammals would have almost certainly stayed exactly where they were on that day 66 million years ago, which is to say small, nocturnal, and thoroughly unremarkable. Before the asteroid impact, mammals had already existed for well over 100 million years without ever growing larger than a small dog, mostly because dinosaurs occupied every major ecological niche available on land. Mammals survived by staying hidden, staying small, and coming out mostly at night when large predatory dinosaurs were less active. Without the mass extinction event that wiped out roughly 3/4 of all species on Earth, dinosaurs would have continued dominating those same ecological niches, and mammals would have had little opportunity or evolutionary pressure to grow larger, diversify, or eventually produce anything resembling a primate, let alone a human. This means that, in a world where dinosaurs never went extinct, there is a very strong likelihood that you, specifically, would never have existed at all. Human evolution depended on a very particular sequence of events, starting with small mammals surviving that asteroid impact, then slowly expanding into ecological niches left empty by extinct dinosaurs, eventually leading to early primates, then hominids, and finally modern humans over the following tens of millions of years. Remove the extinction event, and you remove the opportunity for that entire evolutionary chain to unfold. Instead of humans building cities and writing history, you would likely be looking at a planet still dominated by increasingly sophisticated dinosaur descendants, with mammals remaining a minor, background part of the ecosystem much like reptiles and amphibians are today. Now think about what the physical planet itself might look like in this scenario. Continental drift would have continued regardless of which species dominated the land, so by now, tens of millions of years after the point where dinosaurs would have avoided extinction, the continents would look noticeably different from the world you recognize today, having drifted further apart or into new configurations entirely. Climate patterns would have shifted as well, since Earth's climate 66 million years ago was significantly warmer than it is now, with no permanent ice caps at the poles and lush vegetation extending into regions that are frozen wasteland today. If dinosaurs had continued to dominate, it is likely their presence and behavior, combined with natural long-term climate shifts, would have shaped forests, grasslands, and coastlines in ways quite different from the world shaped primarily by mammals and eventually humans. You should also consider how dinosaur society and behavior might have evolved over such an enormous stretch of time. Evidence already shows that many dinosaur species exhibited complex behaviors before their extinction, including herding, nesting in colonies, caring for their young over extended periods, and even engaging in what appears to be cooperative hunting among certain predatory species. If these behavioral trends continue to develop over another 66 million years, you could reasonably imagine dinosaur societies evolving increasingly sophisticated group structures communication methods, and possibly even primitive forms of culture passed down between generations, especially among smaller, more intelligent species like the troodontid descendants mentioned earlier. Think about what would have happened to the ocean as well, because marine reptiles like mosasaurs and plesiosaurs dominated the seas right alongside dinosaurs on land before the extinction event. Without that mass extinction, these enormous marine predators would have likely continued ruling the oceans, potentially competing with or entirely preventing the rise of many modern marine mammals like whales and dolphins, whose ancestors only had the opportunity to return to the water and diversify because the extinction event cleared out many of their prehistoric competitors. In this alternate world, your oceans might still be patrolled by massive reptilian hunters rather than the whales, dolphins, and seals that define marine life today. There is also the question of what might have eventually challenged dinosaur dominance if not an asteroid. Evolution never truly stops, and even a world without that specific extinction event would still face other pressures over such an enormous span of time, including new diseases, competition between dinosaur species themselves, gradual climate shifts caused by volcanic activity or changing ocean currents, and potentially other, smaller extinction events unrelated to the one that actually occurred in real history. It is entirely possible that dinosaurs could have faced their own later evolutionary bottlenecks, changes, or partial die-offs, just on a much longer and more gradual timeline than the sudden catastrophe that actually ended their reign. Now consider something particularly strange to think about, which is the birds you see flying around you every single day. Birds are, in a very real and scientifically accurate sense, living dinosaurs, having evolved directly from small feathered theropod ancestors that survived the mass extinction while their larger relatives did not. In a world where the asteroid never struck, birds as you know them might never have needed to evolve into the specific niche they occupy today, since their larger dinosaur relatives would still be present and competing for many of the same ecological roles. The delicate, specialized birds you recognize now, built for flight, adapted for surviving in a world without dinosaurs, might instead exist as a much smaller branch within a vastly larger and more diverse dinosaur family tree still dominated by ground-based and semi-aquatic species. If you try to imagine standing on this alternate Earth, tens of millions of years after that asteroid simply missed its target, you would likely be looking at a planet unrecognizable from the one you actually live on. Forests might be filled with feathered predators far more intelligent than any reptile alive today. Plains might be roamed by massive herbivorous herds engaging in complex migratory behavior. Oceans might still belong to giant marine reptiles rather than whales. And somewhere, quietly hidden in the underbrush or in burrows underground, small mammals would likely still exist, much as they did for over 100 million years before the actual extinction event, kept small, cautious, and firmly in the background of a world still ruled by dinosaurs. What makes this thought experiment so powerful is not just imagining a planet full of dinosaurs, but recognizing how fragile and accidental your own existence actually is. Every single person you have ever met, every civilization ever built, every book ever written, and every human thought ever had, all of it depended entirely on a 6-mile-wide rock striking Earth at exactly the right moment in exactly the right place 66 million years ago. Change that single moment, and the story of Earth continues almost entirely without you, following a completely different evolutionary path where dinosaurs, not humans, remain the dominant, ever-evolving rulers of the planet.